Yeah, Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. No one has seen her since Saturday.
The end of your college years is a time of celebration, festivity, and the start of your professional life. However, what happens if a college graduate goes missing? And how do you process the horror when this vibrant, intelligent student with so much promise turns up in pieces discarded in a trash can? This is the story of college graduate Lauren Giddings, whose life and dreams were snuffed out forever at the hands of her own classmate, Stephen McDaniel. DNA-stained underwear, blood-speckled sheets, the packaging of a hacksaw, possession of a master key, a tendency for stalking, and child pornography. Not the usual items found in the room of a fresh law graduate. They were the possessions of Stephen McDaniel, Lauren's neighbor and classmate whose infatuation turned to fury when she rejected his romantic advances. In today's bite-sized true crime recap, we examine the details of Lauren's brutal slaying and learn how Stephen McDaniel lived a double life, volunteering at the local court by day and stalking his neighbor by night. A bizarre TV interview, prolonged cross-examination, guilty confessions, and numerous appeals later, the case remains one of the bloodiest and most harrowing ever. So stay tuned for Deadly Deception, the Stephen McDaniel case. With his long unkempt hair and innocent bearing, no one could have suspected that Stephen McDaniel, an ordinary young man whose childhood and college life appeared mundane, would become a brutal killer. Born on September 9, 1985, he grew up in Lilburn, Georgia, with the only hint of uncouth behavior being his habit of bullying the girls in his class. Stephen enrolled at Mercer Law School at the age of 25, and like so many other students, rented an apartment at Georgia Avenue. The ill-fated, smart, and kind 27-year-old Lauren Giddings would become his next-door neighbor, classmate, and object of his twisted desire. Signs of trouble began right after graduation, when the ambitious Lauren confined herself to her room to study for the Georgia bar exam. She informed her family that she wouldn't be active on her phone, but would text back to let them know her plans and that she was well. In the last week of June 2011, family and friends grew increasingly worried when Lauren couldn't be reached. Her car was parked outside her apartment, but nobody was answering the door. Lauren's friend, Ashley Morehouse, who had a spare key to the apartment, eventually entered it to find her books, belongings, and keys untouched. There was no sign of forced entry, no ransacking, and nothing seemed amiss. Lauren, however, was nowhere to be found. Something felt wrong. Leaving her apartment for weeks was extremely uncharacteristic of Lauren, so Ashley called the police. Since there seemed nothing obviously amiss, the police soon left. However, by June 29th, there was still no sign of Lauren, and with closer investigation, evidence of foul play became obvious. The police launched an investigation and were alarmed at what they discovered when luminol revealed traces of blood on Lauren's walls and bathroom. As the investigation continued, the police stumbled upon a key piece of evidence. Right before Lauren had disappeared, she had emailed her boyfriend, sharing how she suspected someone was stalking her and that there had been break-ins into her apartment. She had shared these concerns with other friends and family as well, but had not yet feared for her safety. A common route the police take when investigating a homicide is to keep a close check on the murder vicinity and to observe the attendees of the victim's funeral. It is not uncommon for murderers to revisit the scene of the crime and relive their actions. Murderers also tend to follow any news coverage of their homicides to check if the police are on their trail. There is no doubt that this is the reason why Stephen McDaniel, posing as a concerned neighbor, was giving a news outlet an interview at the very moment police were searching Lauren's apartment. When reviewing the interview footage, investigators felt that McDaniel was being deceptive. He appeared to be constantly trying to establish that he knew nothing of the whereabouts of his neighbor Lauren, rather than being actually concerned about her safety. Things went downhill quickly for Stephen, however, when an investigator noticed a foul smell emanating from the trash cans near the house. Investigators followed the odor to discover the dismembered body of who they believed to be Lauren Giddings in the dumpsters behind her apartment. When the reporter informed McDaniel on camera that her body had been found, he looked visibly shocked, began stuttering, and asked to sit down. His reaction firmly established him as a person of interest in the eyes of the police. The body was soon identified as Lauren's after samples taken from her hairbrush and from her parents matched the DNA of the dismembered torso. Her arms, legs, and head were missing, never to be found again. Right after the discovery of Lauren's body on June 30, 2011, the police arrested McDaniel, who was trying to break into 2 nearby apartments to steal condoms. It was revealed that McDaniel possessed a master key, granting him access to all the flats in the building, and this fact escalated him to being the prime suspect. A search warrant was issued and a pattern began to emerge as police dug deeper. It turned out that a week prior to her murder, Lauren had turned down McDaniel, who had asked her out because she had a boyfriend. A grotesque picture of criminal behavior became increasingly clear after police got tipped off that McDaniel had been asking about how to commit an undetectable murder after Lauren's rejection. McDaniel, as Lauren had suspected, had been spying on her. The police recovered deleted video footage taken from a camera attached to a pole and inserted through Lauren's windows. He had also been breaking into her apartment frequently and displacing her personal items. His own apartment contained several incriminating possessions, including Lauren's underwear, her personal items and photos, and a key to her apartment. McDaniel's laptop history showcased his sickening fantasies and obsession with Lauren. He would browse violent pornography while simultaneously stalking her social media accounts. The skewed mind of a killer was becoming more and more evident as a picture emerged of a man preoccupied with violent crime against women. When the police recovered a hacksaw covered in Lauren's blood from McDaniel's bedroom, the case against him became watertight. Detective Patterson, McDaniel's interrogator, pressed him about his change in behavior. The chatty, overly helpful neighbor now appeared numb, emotionless, and quiet. The frustrated policeman is quoted as saying, "You ran your mouth to the news media. Now you get down here and you don't fucking know." Experienced detectives observing the interrogation room behavior had no doubt that McDaniel's silence indicated guilt. Oddly, McDaniel was a law student who knew his rights and could have asked for an attorney. Instead, he looked morose and remained uncooperative as Patterson slid a photo of Lauren towards him. Detective Chapman also had no success with the interrogation, with McDaniel stubbornly denying having anything to do with Lauren's disappearance. When McDaniel did talk, he told police his apartment lease was expiring in 2 weeks and he was going back to his family. Detective Chapman decided to push his buttons, deliberately narrating a grotesque picture of the crime scene, describing how Lauren must have screamed and left the fingernail scratches on McDaniel's stomach. Despite being visibly distraught, however, McDaniel remained resolutely silent. Detective Fletcher finally had some modicum of success when he discussed online dating with McDaniel, who told him of his unsuccessful attempts to meet someone. However, the only incriminating thing to come out of that long night of back and forth with the stubborn murderer was McDaniel confessing to burglary. The search warrant issued the next day revealed all the police needed to know about this strange man in their custody. After 10 months in jail, McDaniel, in an attempt to procure a plea deal, finally talked. He confessed to breaking and entering into Lauren's apartment at 4:30 a.m. on July 27th. He recounted how she woke up and screamed at him to get out. There was a scuffle and he strangled her and then later dismembered her. He also confessed to stalking her for as long as they had lived near each other. Finally, justice was served when McDaniel was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. McDaniel didn't give up, however, and kept filing appeals to invalidate his life imprisonment sentence. The most recent appeal was filed to the Middle District of Georgia in June 2022, where the now 37-year-old inmate alleged that his defense counsel was incompetent. District Court Judge Mark T. Treadwell saw things differently, however, and ruled that the appeal was filed a year too late. McDaniel, however, is not giving up. In fact, his latest appeal was filed on January 17, 2023 to the U.S. District Court in Macon. Lauren's family continues to honor her memory, recalling on the 10th anniversary of her death how much she meant to them and what a great future she would have had if her life was not so brutally cut short. Lauren was the first in her family to attend college and aspired to become a defense attorney once she passed her bar exam. In her memory, the Association of Women Law Students at Mercer Law holds a memorial every year that has launched a scholarship program in her name to benefit women from underprivileged backgrounds in their pursuit of legal education. Agnes Scott College, where Lauren completed her undergraduate studies, also holds an annual memorial walk in her name. The brutal murder of Lauren Giddings is a representation of the evil that walks among us. She was a bright college graduate and an aspiring lawyer who would have been a valuable member of her community, yet she was brutally murdered by a disturbed individual with despicable tendencies. Despite McDaniel's efforts to clear his name and reduce his sentence, the courts are determined to keep this monster behind bars for the remaining years of his life. For now, Stephen McDaniel has nothing to do other than spend the rest of his life in jail, reflecting on the outcome of his deadly deception and murder of Laura Giddings.